Thank you for joining us. Come on in. Hi.
Hi, what's going on today?
All right. Hey, hi there. My name is Andres Martinez. You probably remember me. I'm a NASA engineer, and I work for NASA right in your neighborhood, about 10 miles from your schools. Welcome to Destination Space 2021. Today we have another special guest. Remember, this month we're gonna focus on planet Earth, our beautiful home planet Earth. In February we took you to Mars. In March we went to the moon, and in April you're gonna get to hear presentations from some amazing people about planet Earth. All right, please help me welcome Dr. Andrea Bogomolni. She also goes by Dr. Dre. Isn't that cool? She's a marine biologist. She is a community scientist, as well as many is a naturalist, an artist, a biologist, conservationist with a passion for the ocean. She's gonna talk about seals as sentinels of ocean health. She's gonna tell us all about her amazing work. And I get to work with some of her colleagues. This is really, really amazing work. So everyone, please pay close attention to her presentation. She's gonna tell us some incredible things about her work. And remember, there's only one rule. We're all going to mute our mics to give her the courtesy of sharing her amazing work, okay? So please help me welcome Dr. Dre. I'm gonna go ahead and mute my mic so that she can share her presentation. Okay, Dr. Dre, please.
Oh, thank you so much. Let me see if I share and this works. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Awesome. Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to share something that's so important to me about planet Earth, and that's our oceans and a group of species of animals that's near and dear to my heart that I feel so lucky that I get to study. And I'm so excited to share that with you. And it's about how seals are sentinels of ocean health. But before I get into seals, I thought I would tell you a little bit about me, since one of the questions I always get is, how do you start studying seals? How on earth did you come to actually start looking at these animals? So we're going to start really, really short, just an idea of where I came from into the story, and maybe you can use this as a frame too in the future for what you can do. So I was born on the West Coast, where you guys are but in San Francisco. So that's where I'm originally from. And my family actually came there from Argentina. So I spent a lot of time on the other side of the world, down south in Argentina. And I spent a lot of time going in between the two places and thinking about, what do I want to be when I grow up? This was a big question I still ask myself. But I went to college at UC Davis, so out in California. And I decided that I would go out east and go to the East Coast to do grad school where I could study seals. Even though there's seals on the West Coast, I went east because I really loved a place called Woods Hole. And from there, in Woods Hole, I started working for an organization called the Cape Cod Stranding Network, which introduced me to marine mammals and studying how they live, how they die, and what we can learn about them. And I ended up working at the place that I loved, which was the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. And I also started working more and more with all these different organizations, not only in my own backyard, but across the world as well in the Eastern Caribbean, and started working with the Eastern Caribbean Cetacean Network, which is a group that was really formed to help save and understand marine mammals. I went back to school because I think I did 26 years of school in all, so 26 grades, and did my PhD and what we call a postdoc. And then I decided seals were really what I loved, and I went back to them and started teaching a lot at the Shoals Marine Lab, Mass Maritime Academy. And I also started putting together a group of people just to talk about seals called the Northwest Atlantic Seal Research Consortium. But we don't just do seals, we work with fishermen too. And it's one of my favorite places to be is on a boat. And right now, what I do is I help put all these pieces together in a field called philanthropy to try and get everybody to be able to do the work that they love. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit of my story, which brings me to our seals. So what seals do we have, and what seals am I going to be talking about? Well, the species that we're going to look at and that I look at are where I live now, which is the East Coast of the United States. And we have a couple common species that we look at. And I don't know if anybody has ever seen a seal, but they're really incredible animals. And we have two species here. We have gray seals and we have harbor seals. And we also get visitors that come from way up in the Arctic, sometimes called harp seals, hooded seals, and ring seals. So we have a couple of species that we can look at here, and they're all incredibly fascinating, and we're learning so much about them. But how do we study seals? I mean, it's not that easy. Some of them are really big, some of them go very fast. What do we do? How does this work? And this is part of the story, which I truly love, is thinking about how do we even study these animals before we even get into what are we going to study? How do we study them? And it's exciting because you get to use all kinds of knowledge bases and I say your back pocket, things that you love, whether it's photography or art or music. There's all these other pieces in our lives that we can use to study animals. And if you're a good photographer, it's a great tool in order to study these animals. We can take pictures of them to study them with a camera in your hand. And we can also use cameras that are on things called drones, or these flying machines that we can take pictures from. And that's another way that we can get images and study these animals. This is a picture from one of those drone surveys, which I love, because if you look closely, we can get really far in, and what we see is a mom and a pup. And it's really incredible, all the information you can get just by taking a picture. And what we can take from these pictures, if we go up really close, is sometimes we can see that they have tags that researchers and scientists have put on in the past. So if you look with your binoculars or your camera, you might be able to see these little colorful tags on them. And I know I'm probably really small in your screen, but this is what they look like. There's little tags. They go on their hind flippers, and they can be different colors, and sometimes they can even be hats. So researchers even put hats on seals, or they can put numbers on seals too. And sometimes seals just have marks on them that we can identify. We don't even have to do anything. And this is my favorite. This is Mr. T. And I don't know if you can tell, but he's called Mr. T because he actually has a T on the side of his head. And that T will stay with him for the rest of his life. It's just a spot, and they all have different kind of spot patterns. And you, as an individual, as a citizen scientist, can make reports of seals that are interesting. We put together a website called MAIN.WHOI.EDU, or the Marine Animal Identification Network, where you can actually report animals as well. So that's how we can look at seals. And sometimes we need our hands on seals. We actually need to get a hold of them. And what we've done in the past is we've actually worked to capture them. And this was the first attempt we've ever done on this coast to capture very, very large seals. And we captured in 2013 large adult gray seals, and they can be like 800 pounds. It's a lot of seal, but it takes a lot of people to do it. So this was probably 15 to 20 people in 20 different organizations working to catch seals. And we were able to actually catch these seals and do work on them to understand how they live. It was pretty exciting. And if at the end of it, with success, we can catch them and actually put a tag on them. And that's what you can see on the top of their back right there is a little tag. And that tag can give us information about where these animals go and how they live. It's really, really cool. So this animal went all over the East Coast Ocean. It went so far, it went hundreds of miles out, and we didn't know that until we put tags on these animals. And I see a question, and I can take it now or I can wait. Let me see. I have a hand raised patiently.
Okay, would you like to answer her question? That's Ariel. Go ahead, Ariel, unmute yourself then. How are you?
Good. And are the seals all different?
They are, they're all different. They're like you and me. Each one of them is an individual. And that is such a great question. Thank you for asking it. Yes, everyone is an individual. And that's something that we're learning from being able to study these animals. And that's such a great point to point out, because we wouldn't know that until we actually started paying attention to that. So thank you for that. And I'll keep going just to go through, and we can take questions maybe toward the end just to make sure I can give all of this great information to you too. But we'll keep going because we do other things that are incredibly exciting that you might ask questions about. We catch baby seals too. So this is my favorite. They're more my size. And we catch these baby seals so that we can do some of the same work. We call them pups. That's what these small seals are called, they're pups. And you can see a pup that a friend of mine is very carefully holding. She's not sitting on it, she's holding it. And these animals are incredible. So even though they get to be 800 pounds, they start off very small and they're incredibly interesting to study as well. And I will say they really do get to me, and they look at you when you're trying to do work on them, and then you can actually do the studies you want to do once you have them in your hands. So what do we do with these baby seals, these young seals? We take samples from them, we take measurements from them, we take data so that we can learn about the population. And this is a data sheet showing some of the things that we can actually take or study from them. What we do, we take nasal swabs because we're looking for viruses and bacteria and different pathogens. We can take blood samples from them as well because we can learn a lot from blood. We can find out a lot of information about just the individual by putting that little tag on them that we took pictures of to see if we can recite them. And sometimes we get a little piece of tissue for genetics. And my favorite sample, because we learn so much, is we actually take a poop sample. If we're lucky enough, they'll leave us a sample, and it's a really important sample to take. So why do we spend so much time with seals? Why is it that I've spent my life understanding these animals? And it's because they tell us about health, not just about just the health of the seal, but the health of the ocean. And that's, for me, the real reason why it's so important to study these animals. So we can learn about plastics and garbage and warming oceans, viruses, overfishing. We can learn about noise pollution so much just by understanding these animals. And what we call them are sentinels. And a sentinel is, in the dictionary, a person or thing that watches or stands guard as watching, a soldier stationed to prepare for a surprise attack, to stand sentinel. And that's exactly what seals are to a lot of us. And all these little dots here on this little beach, all of those things are seals, and all of those to me are sentinels to what we can learn about the ocean. And I wanted to play this because I wasn't sure if all of you have actually seen seals and how they move. And these are gray seals. I'm going to play a sound. That's what they sound like when there's a lot of seals. Pretty incredible what they sound like. So they're amazing animals, and they're amazing because they tell us about the health of our oceans, and they act as sentinels. And to me, this was the story that got to me the most and pushed me to really understand and become a scientist that studies these animals. Is I was working with a colleague across the ocean in Sweden, and she was working in a place called the Baltic. And what she told me was the seals there, even when they're alive, they have so many contaminants or toxins. They're considered toxic waste. And what happens when they have these toxins, which we call PCBs, is that it causes issues, health issues. So they don't have pups, they get sick, they have cancers. And it was a signal to humans that something was wrong in the environment because these seals were getting sick. And to me, that was absolutely just, I couldn't believe it. How could we do this to an animal? But then what can we do about it, right? We got to do something about it. And I think that, to me, is part of the incredible story, is we fixed this problem because seals told us about it. And it's not just about the seals that are telling us about what's happening. They're about humans, but they can tell us again about other animals in the ocean. these are orcas. They're not seals. So if anybody's ever seen an orca, they're very hard to catch. You can't just go out and get a couple of them and take samples. They're very large animals. So how do we find out what's happening to these large animals in the ocean? There was a researcher named Peter Ross, and he had an idea, and he basically figured we could use seals to find out what was happening to these orcas, because orcas have a high concentration or high level of that same contaminant called a PCB. And in different populations, they have different amounts. And seals, you can actually catch, you can put them in pens, you can research them and then let them go and understand what's happening. So he ended up feeding harbor seals food that these killer whales were eating to see what would happen. And what happened was at this very low level, at 17, we saved 17 parts per million. And just to give you an idea, the killer whales had 300, right? So at 17, we started seeing health effects in these seals. And those are called immunotoxic effects. And that's one of the things I study. And at these levels, these very low levels, these animals were affected. So by learning what happened to seals, we could start inferring and understand what happened to animals we can't put our hands on necessarily. And part of that, and why it's so interesting, is because seals are affected by what they eat, and they get everything from in their bodies from what they're eating in the ocean. And they eat things in the ocean that we also eat. So learning about seals, again, can tell us about what's happening to us. But I like to remind people that in our ecosystems in our ocean, it's really complex. You can't just say a seal eats one thing or a human eats one thing. We eat a lot of different things. And that's another thing seals tell us. So this is a food web, and a food web explains who eats what, who goes where in the system. And if you were to look at this, it says top predators, mesopredator, that's like the middle. It has fish and birds and plankton and little things in the ocean. And seals fit right here. So you can see they're connected by a lot of little spider webs, right? So they are in between it all and affected not just by what they're eating itself, but who might be eating them as well. So we can learn about whole systems of the ocean just by looking at seals and where their place is. And of course, what eats seals? Here we always talk about sharks because sharks eat seals. And so this is much cuter than thinking about what sharks actually do to seals, but it's really important, again, because seals can tell us about the whole ocean. One of the really big issues that we're seeing in our oceans right now is global warming or warming oceans. And most people think about polar bears or animals that are living in icebergs when they think about climate change and warming oceans. But seals tell us a lot, and especially in California, they have really told us a lot. So there was an event that happened called the Pacific BLOB, which sounds very ominous and scary, but what it was really warm water. So we'll just distill it to that. And this area right here of really, really warm water caused some problems in the ocean, and it caused some problems for a lot of pinnipeds or seals and sea lions. And what happened was when the waters get warm, sea lion moms can't find enough fish to eat, and then they can't make enough milk to give to their pups. So they had to leave their pups behind. And basically the pups, these seals and sea lions, were telling us that there was something wrong in the ocean. And they told us about this before we really figured it out as humans. So really important to pay attention. Unfortunately, there's a lot of caring people out there that like rescuing and can help these animals. So the good part of that story is that these animals were rescued and could make it out and survive. And if you notice down here on its flipper, it has one of those tags. So we can monitor those animals over time, and you can as well if you see these animals with tags. So there's a good end to that story. There's a lot of caring people out there that wanted to fix the problem. Another way that seals tell us about the oceans and ocean health is plastics. So plastics, I use plastic all the time. I actually have a pen in front of me that has plastic on it. I think it's on the tag itself. We use plastics a lot. And it's a problem because seals can get this as well, the plastics. And that can be something like this up here. And it's hard to see, but what that is a Frisbee. It's one of those Frisbees that has a hole in the middle. And seals are really, really inquisitive, curious. And so they'll swim into those Frisbees. And so that's plastic. And also, unfortunately, fishing line a lot of times can impact these animals as well. And then what happens over time with some of these plastics is they break down into smaller pieces and they can be eaten by the small organisms all the way up through that food web up to seals. So seals can tell us about how plastics are moving in our oceans as well. So why do we care about seals? So hopefully I've given you some background about why I think they're important and why I can spend years and years understanding them and sharing what I know and why it's so important. But when we really take it all in, what they tell us, again, is that they're sentinel species. Remember, they're sentinels. They stand guard, they stand watch and tell us what's happening with our oceans. They play really important ecological roles. We say they're part of that food system. They're part of the food web. They play all these incredible roles. They're really important for ecotourism. People like to go see seals. So if we want to start getting people interested because they might be able to have a job or create a business, seals are really good for that. People love to go and watch these animals. And we also say they're important because they help us understand ocean stewardship. There's so much of the ocean that we have no idea what's there. We have still so much to explore, but we can't get to that point if people don't care about it. And seals really help us instill an idea of ocean stewardship to us, to everybody on the planet, and maybe beyond, perhaps. But my favorite story about why I think seals are important is one that I would never have guessed. And this is my favorite story to tell, or favorite piece of science story to tell. So I show this picture and it's very interesting. There's seals and there's horses. And people always say, why are you showing me a picture of seals and horses? Well, one of the places that seals have made their home is a small island off the coast of Canada, hundreds of miles out. And on this island, maybe there's a seal researcher, there's not many people at all, but there's horses, seals, and grass. And it turns out that when seals recovered, because we actually hunted seals for a long time, the horses that were out there seemed to be doing a lot better. And so researchers started making connections that seals on the beach, they leave that really important sample behind that I really like, the one that they leave behind, their poop sample or scat sample, and it helps the beach grasses grow. And because of that, the beach grasses are preventing the island from disappearing and feeding the horses. So there's all these incredible connections, which we still have yet to learn and yet to understand. And part of that is just by paying attention and listening and learning and using all those skills we have to just wait and see and really understand what's happening in our ocean environment. So I will leave you with that of why we care about them. There's so many reasons and there's so much science to do, but I also think they're just incredible organisms on this planet that we've still yet to understand so much about. And with that, I will end and say thank you so much for listening. And if you guys have questions, everybody, I would love to answer them. And I might need help.
Hey, so it looks like Anthony Delgado has had his hand up patiently. So if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
What do seals eat?
Oh, it's a great question. Seals eat, we say, whatever is most abundant, and that includes fish and squid, primarily where I live, and certain type of fish. They eat a fish called hake and sand lance. Those are their favorite fish, and things called flounder as well. And squid, they really like squid. It's a great question. And I don't know if you can help call. I've got so many. I don't know who to call on first.
Sure, let's see. Jose Arroyo, go ahead, unmute yourself. Jose Arroyo Mesa.
I was wondering if the life of seals, the gray seals especially, is it decreasing or increasing of the warming of the water? Does it affect?
Jose, that was a great question. I'm already incredibly happy to answer all these. So gray seals are increasing in numbers right now because they're actually protected. There used to be a point where we almost eliminated all of them because we hunted them. And so they're increasing now, fortunately. So I like to say we started from 0 and now we're going up. So that's the direction we get to go, which is great. But we are trying to understand what's happening with warming oceans. With warming oceans, their food is moving and their food is moving north. So we don't know whether or not that's going to affect seals, whether they're going to move north with their food or just not have enough food to begin with. And in the waters that the seals live, where I live, it's the fastest warming body of water on Earth is the Gulf of Maine, where I live. And that's really a big concern. And we're paying attention to these seals to make sure that they're getting enough food that they need to eat too. It's a great question.
Okay, how about Kuyen Tok? Go ahead, unmute yourself. There you go, unmute yourself.
So, how long can seal live?
Seals, oh, let me stop sharing. I realized I was still looking at that seal. Seals can live 25 to 40 years. And we know that, and this is part of that interesting story of another great question, is some of those seals, I don't know if you noticed, I said they had numbers on their back, they had brands, we call it. And those animals came to us from Canada. And those animals have been seen since the 1970s, which means they're 40 years old at least. So that's really exciting. So the seals we have here, the gray seals we know can be at least 40, and the harbor seals probably a little bit less, but pretty close. Great question.
Okay, so it looks like Angelica and Mateo have had their hands up. So if you want to go ahead and ask your questions.
My name is actually Mateo. What happens if if you put the tag to one seal and they're navigating to place, and one animal eats it with the tag?
Awesome question. So the question, just so I get it, is what happens if you put a tag on an animal and another animal eats it? What happens to the tag, or what happens? It's a great question. So sometimes if you, I could say I have friends that work with the large animals, sharks. I have friends here that work with them. I always ask them if they have ever, opened a shark that maybe had a seal. And most of the time, if that's the case, if it had a tag, you can get the tag back. So I haven't had that happen yet to any of the ones I've tagged, but it will still give tracks as long as the tag goes back up to the surface for a lot of those animals that do come to the surface. But if the tag never comes up to the surface, if it's one of those satellite tags, we won't know. But there is a kind of tag that is just meant to find out what happens if an animal gets eaten. It's called a mortality tag, which is pretty cool. So scientists come up with all kinds of cool, crazy ideas to figure out how to answer that exact question. And a lot of the work that we're doing is waiting sometimes to find these tags in animals that ate them. That's an incredible question. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Ryan, Ariana. Go ahead, Ariana. You had your hand up for a while. Go ahead.
If fishes eat some animals, what happens to the fishes?
So I couldn't hear it because it broke up a little bit. So is it what happens to the fish when the animals eat them? Yeah. So the fish becomes part of that animal. So when a fish is eaten by a seal, it actually becomes part of it. So it becomes the energy it needs to live. It becomes part of its own muscle, it becomes part of its own structures, which is why what we eat is so important, because even for us, just like a seal, it becomes part of us, or it becomes part of the sample that I like to collect, which we call scat sometimes too, and is left behind. So those hard parts that are found in a fish, sometimes we go look for in their scat, in their poop, we call it, so we can find out what they ate. So lots of things happen to the fish, but ultimately what happens is what that fish was becomes part of the seal itself. Just like us, that's why we have to eat healthy, eat good food, right? Becomes part of us.
Okay. Tangela has had her hand up. So if you want to go ahead and ask your question, Jen.
So does seals hunt together for food?
Another fabulous. You guys are asking the best questions. So seals tend to eat alone. They don't like to have too much company, but they do sometimes find themselves, and this is just seals, the seals I have on our coast here on the East Coast, will be together, but they don't hunt necessarily together. And that's different for other species, but the ones we have here mostly just hunt on their own. Good question.
Okay, let's go to Santiago if you want to unmute yourself.
The question I have is, what was the very first seal that you caught? People caught.
The first seal, thank you for that question. The first seal I was able to help with, I think I was 14 or 15, was an elephant seal off of MAIN.WHOI.EDU Island, close to where you guys are. It was the first seal I was able to help with to understand seals. And I will say it was a baby elephant seal, not an adult, because the adults are really big. Thank you for that question.
Hey, Giovanni, go ahead and ask your question.
What happens if seals eat other animals' foods?
So seals eat what's in the ocean, but if they are eating a fish that another seal might have also wanted, sometimes they get into fights. So they have really big claws and they have big teeth. So there are times where they kind of fight it out if they're going for the same fish, and usually the bigger one wins the fish. It's a good question.
All right, let's do one more question.
What about Michaela? She has been waiting so patient. You want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
What happens if we see a seal on the beach, even when you think it's injured, and what do we do?
That is such a good question. Thank you. What you should do if you see a seal that's injured is you call your local marine mammal stranding network organization, and there's numbers you can call. And the best thing you can do is make sure you don't touch it. You don't get too close because they do have teeth and they do have claws. And you get people that help and are trained to help. So the best thing you can do is make that phone call to see if somebody can come and help. That's such a great question and such an important question.
All right. Great questions, everyone. Did you guys enjoy the talk? Isn't she amazing? All right. Hey, thank you, Dr. Dre. What an honor to have you as a guest. This was amazing. Thank you for sharing what you do. I'm sure everyone appreciates this, and some of them may even start thinking, they probably are starting to think about growing up and being a marine biologist and helping our beautiful planet. Okay, thank you. And let's open up our video camera so that we can take a photo with Dr. Dre. Tangela, can you please open up your video camera? Giovanni, you just went away, Giovanni, come on. All right, Giovanni doesn't want to be in the photo. Okay, there he is. All right, everybody, big smile. Okay, ready? 1, 2. Okay, give me 1 second. 1 second, let me see how it came out. Oh, what a night. Look at all those big smiles. All right, well, help me give Dr. Dre a nice virtual round of applause.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome. So let me go back to our slides here. So today we had the honor of having Dr. Andrea Bogomolni. She shared not only what she does, but she also gave you a little bit of her personal information, where she comes from and the schools that she went to. And tomorrow we're gonna have another incredible guest. We're gonna have Mr. Jacob Levinson, and he's gonna talk to us about the secret lives of ocean giants. I actually work with Dr. Jacob Levinson. So tomorrow he may tell you a little bit about what we're doing. And so come back tomorrow, same time, same link. And remember why we're doing this, right? Did everybody do their homework? Raise your hand if you did your homework. Okay, I don't see okay, more hands are going up. Okay, good. Did everybody do their assignments today? Make sure you finish them. Remember, we know you're special. This is why we're doing this, because we want you to do well in school. We want you to do well in middle school, high school, go to college. And when you're in college, you can come and help us. Remember, NASA needs a lot of help. Dr. Dre needs all of you to come and help her too. Okay? But you have to do well in school. You have to go to college. You have to do really well in school. All right? And you also have to be good members of your community. If you see something where you can help, make sure you help us so we can continue to make our beautiful home, our beautiful planet Earth, really nice for everyone. Okay? So remember, tomorrow, come back tomorrow. We're going to have my buddy, Mr. Jacob Levinson, tell you what he does also. All right? Thanks, everyone. We're going to end our session and Destination 2021 just for you guys, because you're special. Thank you, Dr. Dre. Thank you, Ellen Rock. Thank you, Ms. Carmichael. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good day, everyone. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.